And now it's time for Music Theory at Home with Mark Grizzard.
18, 19, 20. Oh, hey everybody. I hope online learning is off to a good start for you. Today's going to be a little shorter. I did not realize how often I say the word when I record. Do I do that in class? How come nobody told me? Alright, I'm going to be more efficient here. As we remember from species counterpoint way back in the day, we are concerned with consonants and dissonance, right? So the way we might frame that in species counterpoint is to say that consonant intervals are our unisons, thirds, fifths, sixths, and eighths, right? And our dissonant intervals are twos, fours, and sevens. Can we have twos, fours, and sevens? Well, in second species counterpoint we can, when they are on our unaccented beats. That is to say, when we have downbeats or the beginnings of measures, we need consonant intervals only. And then we can have twos, fours, and sevens on our unaccented beats when they are passing tones and neighbor tones, right? We have not forgotten this, and this was not a waste of time way back in species counterpoint, because now we're going to take these concepts into chorale style, into keyboard writing, all these textures we're going to be looking at as we move forward, and we're just going to reframe the concept a little bit. So now let's refer to consonants as chord tones, that is to say, pitches that belong to a chord, right? When we've been figuring out Roman numeral analysis, that is determining a chord, and all the notes that are chord tones we might call consonants. Notes that are not in the chord we might refer to as dissonant tones, dissonant pitches, and our book might call these embellishing tones. Sure, why not? I grew up calling these non-chord tones. So in SATB writing, we've got chord tones and we've got non-chord tones. Here we see an example in C major, real clear, obvious chords. Hopefully this will be super easy to analyze, which we see below the staff here. A 1, 4, 5, 1. Every pitch you see on this screen is a chord tone. Roman numeral analysis is a piece of cake. Now, if we were to add some quarter notes here and there, some of them might be easy to analyze, others might sort of muck up our analysis, and it might be harder to come up with a Roman numeral analysis. Although it still kind of sounds fun. Right? And we're starting to see some interest to this music. However, it'd be a little more off-putting to come up with a Roman numeral analysis for this. Here is where we sort of take our consideration of consonants and dissonance into this style. If I'm trying to create a Roman numeral analysis of this, I recognize that, well, most of these pitches could belong to harmony. Certainly this first chord is still a nice, neat C major triad. I don't know what to do with this D in the tenor. Does this mean it's some sort of D chord? I don't know, but it definitely does not belong to a C major chord. First stab here, what we do is we circle pitches that we think might be dissonant pitches so that our Roman numeral analysis does not take them into account. So here, I've circled all of what I consider to be the non-chord tones, and by circling them, I'm left with chords that are easy to analyze, and I think our ears agree that it sounds like there's clear harmonies going on. These notes add decoration, and maybe this is why our book calls them embellishing tones. They make this more interesting. I think you might agree that what I just played is a little more interesting to listen to than the first all-block chord excerpt. So as we were trying to add some dissonance into our music, we want to use this dissonance sparingly. I think the classic idiom is like adding some spice to food. You don't want to just eat a whole spoonful of cayenne pepper. We just want to use this a little bit and still let there be clear harmonies underneath. So on Reginet, I've given you a whole 2-page handout of all the different types of non-chord tones we're going to be looking at. For starters, we're only going to be looking at 2 of them that are going to sound familiar to us: passing tones and neighbor tones. I don't think I need to go through the definition of these, right? Just as we did in second species counterpoint, we might employ passing tones and neighbor tones into our music. The definition is there in this handout. I think it's pretty intuitive. What we're now doing is circling these pitches, adding a P or an N to let us know that, well, if I analyzed everything but these circled pitches, I have chords. So now these passing tones and neighbor tones are examples of non-chord tones. Cool. So again, your book is a great resource to you, and especially if you were able to get the online e-book through the digital resources. We see Bach recording, a Bach chorale, Aus meines Herzengründe, and your ebook would let you listen to this with a little, I think a little headphone icon. For now, what do we notice? G major. It certainly starts easily enough with a nice G major triad, and then things start to get interesting. You can certainly recognize that some clear harmonies are going on underneath, and they have been decorated with embellishing tones, or what I might refer to as non-chord tones. How can we analyze this? By circling these pitches and labeling them as either passing tones or neighbor tones. I don't think this is going to be too bad. Let's see if we can give it a shot. So here we see the answers from the book. Of course, all chord tones at the beginning. This first alto moving line is circled as a passing tone. Maybe you were tempted to make this next alto F sharp a passing tone. However, if we are going to be really meticulous here, we notice that we can call a new chord when this alto E turns into an F sharp. It can belong to now, as we see here, a 7 diminished 6 chord. Just because a note is in between two pulses doesn't mean it cannot be analyzed. One could analyze beat 2 as a 2 chord and the and of 2 as a 7 diminished 6 chord. These are the sort of things we want to worry about, and certainly we're going to see an example here at the end. Hopefully this neighbor tone in the tenor is pretty clear. When we get to the and beat 2 in measure 9, maybe you circled everything and said, oh, I see movement, I'm going to call these non-chord tones, ba-boom, boom, circles everywhere. That should visually look a little weird to you. If almost everything is circled, maybe there's not really a chord left. If all of our tones are non-chord tones, then there's no chord. A second look could let us possibly consider all of these tones on the end of beat 2 in measure 9 as a new chord. And sure enough, we can analyze that as a 5-4-3 chord. So this is the process we're going through with non-chord tones, deciding what we can analyze and deciding what we can circle and forget about. So passing tones and neighbor tones are our first foray into the world of non-chord tones. Let's take a look at the homework. And we are looking at 16.1, adding passing tones or neighbor tones as specified. We see quarter note rhythms given here in SATB texture, and we're asked to use eighth note rhythms to create passing tones and neighbor tones. As we might remember from counterpoint, the only time we can add a passing tone between two pitches is when they are a third apart, which is why number 1 here, the only option was to add a passing tone in the bass. For number 2, our bass could not add a passing tone. It could add a neighbor tone here, but we're asked to create passing tones for right now. And the only option, well, one of two options, would be a soprano passing tone. An alto could also do that. I add a P there, and then my Roman numeral would still be a 1 chord and a 1 chord. Piece of cake. Let's jump to C and D, which is our homework. 16.1 part 1, C and D. We would see the request for simultaneous passing tones. Our bass could add a passing tone, our soprano could add a passing tone. Adding those and reflecting the Roman numerals, how now we have a 1 chord going to a 1-6 chord, should be pretty straightforward. Let's be careful on number 5. We're in minor and we want to avoid melodic dissonances. We might have to use a trick from second species counterpoint for that. Part D, add simultaneous passing and neighbor tones. Of course, for a neighbor tone, we just need a voice that stays put. Okay, it might be a little more work to do part 2. Now we see here plenty of Roman numerals for a full chorale. And our instructions are asked to write an interesting melody in the soprano that makes a good counterpoint with the bass. Of course, the bass is going to be given to us through our Roman numerals. And I might start just as how I might start counterpoint with getting the bones down first. So I'm going to first just create the chords. Bunch of quarter notes, each of which fulfill the Roman numerals. We know how to do this, yes? By adding passing tones and neighbor tones, we can decorate this clear harmonic movement, and they ask for at least one pair of simultaneous passing or neighbor tones. Okay, sure. So I take a look at the work I've just done and do the same process. So while there are many right answers, here's what I came up with. It is this. That's not too bad. Now I want to go back and check it just like I checked writing up to this point. I've got a good resolution of tendency tones here when 5 moves to 1. What I'm a little worried about is the very end. I didn't know what to do here. My quarter notes were so smooth, the only thing I could really do was add a neighbor tone in my alto. But what's the result? This is parallel fifths. And we are worried about parallel fifths even as passing tones and neighbor tones decorate our music. So I need to edit my work and make this, I'm going to make it go up to a G. But now I've doubled the leading tone. So I'm going to edit my tenor. And now my final 2 measures. Yeah, I like that. Okay, homework is 16.1, Part 1, C and D, and Part 2, B. I'll point out that we are in minor. And there's episode 2. Again, we're in chapter 16 in the book. Pages 322 to 325 could be a help to you, or send me an email. Come to my online office hours. Have a great day, you guys. 1, 2...